Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. At 60 years old, Walter's short gray hair was thinning on top, and deep wrinkles carved lines around his eyes and mouth. He adjusted his tie, the silk fabric feeling tight and constrictive around his neck. With a sigh, he picked up his briefcase and headed out the door to the office, same as he had done every weekday morning for the past 35 years. But today was different. Today was Walter's last day before retirement. His co-workers had organized a goodbye party, complete with generic grocery store cake and half-hearted well wishes. Walter smiled and shook hands, secretly counting down the minutes until he could leave and never come back. The truth was, Walter had never felt at home in the stiff, competitive world of business and finance. He'd taken the stable office job out of necessity in his 20s when he got married and had to support a family. But something deep inside him had always yearned for more, for softness, beauty, and unrestrained self-expression. That hidden part of himself manifested in a lifelong fascination with women's clothing. As a boy, Walter would secretly play dress-up when no one was around, twirling in his mother's skirts and smearing on her lipstick. The desire never went away, even as he grew into a man. Every so often, when his wife Janet was away, he'd furtively order dresses and wigs online, heart racing as he tried them on behind locked doors. He'd perfected the art of hiding this side of himself. The dresses and makeup were kept in a locked suitcase in the attic. The packages were delivered to a P.O. box. The browser history was always wiped clean. If Janet or his co-workers ever found out, it would be devastating. A man like him couldn't have feminine interests, or so he'd always believed. But now, driving home from his retirement party, Walter felt the stirrings of possibility, scary yet exhilarating. He was 60, no longer beholden to a job or reputation. His kids were grown and out of the house. For the first time, he glimpsed a future where maybe, just maybe, he could truly be himself. Not just behind closed doors, but out in the world. The idea terrified and thrilled him. When Walter arrived home, Janet greeted him with a hug and kiss, eyes shining with happy tears. "I'm so proud of you, honey. You worked so hard all these years to provide for us. You deserve this retirement." He smiled, throat constricting with a combination of gratitude and guilt. "Thanks, Janet. I couldn't have done it without you by my side." Later that evening, after Janet went to bed, Walter snuck up to the attic, heart pounding. With shaking hands, he unlocked the suitcase, lifted the lid, and carefully unpacked the secret treasures inside. The silky dresses, the glittery eyeshadow palettes, the flowing wigs. He held them reverently, pulse quickening. This time felt different from all the other times he'd guiltily tried on women's clothing in stolen moments. There was no more hiding, no more shame choking him. He was retired now. He could wear what he wanted, experiment, and explore this side of himself. Still, his stomach clenched at the thought of Janet finding out, of her confusion or disgust or rejection. She loved him as a husband, a man. Would she still love this new version of him? He wasn't sure he could handle losing her, the one constant in his life these past 35 years. Walter stayed up late into the night, trying on dresses, wigs, and makeup looks. Each time he glimpsed himself in the mirror, something inside him shivered in delight and relief. Seeing his outside match his inside, the person he'd always secreted away now reflected back at him. He knew he couldn't keep this hidden forever. He didn't want to hide anymore, to sneak around and feel ashamed. But the idea of revealing himself, of risking everything, made his throat close up in fear. In the days and weeks after retirement, Walter carved out more time for himself while Janet was busy with her hobbies and social clubs. He drove to the next town over and nervously browsed the women's clothing boutiques, purchasing dresses, skirts, and heels. He watched makeup tutorials on YouTube, practicing techniques alone in the bathroom. Bit by bit, he grew more confident, more enamored with this vibrant side of himself. He started taking walks around the neighborhood early in the morning before anyone else was out and about. The first time, he only made it to the end of the driveway before anxiety sent him scurrying back inside, adrenaline spiking. But gradually, he ventured out further, down the block, around the corner, to the park. The breeze ruffling his skirt, the sun on his carefully made-up face. An ordinary woman out for a morning stroll. It felt like freedom, like finally exhaling after a lifetime of holding his breath. Still, the guilt gnawed at him. The weight of the secret, the fear of how Janet would react. He hated hiding this from her, the woman who knew him better than anyone. But the need for her acceptance, her understanding, stopped his tongue every time he thought about confessing. Until one evening, when Janet went out to dinner with friends, Walter seized the opportunity. With a trembling heart, he did his makeup, donned his favorite green silk dress, and arranged his auburn wig just so. He'd made dinner reservations at a cozy bistro the next town over. For the first time, he would eat at a restaurant while dressed as a woman. The thought made his palms slick and his pulse gallop. Hands shaking, Walter managed to drive to the restaurant without incident. He pushed down the terror clawing at his throat as he stepped out of the car. The click of his heels on the pavement, the swish of his skirt around his knees, his reflection in the glass doors, an ordinary woman in a pretty green dress.
"Table for one, please,"
he said to the hostess, voice breaking only slightly. At the table, he scanned the menu, the words blurring before his eyes. His skin prickled with awareness of the other diners. Were they looking at him? Could they tell? He expected laughter, disgust, pointing, and stares, but no one glanced at him twice. To them, he was simply a 60-year-old woman having dinner alone on a weekday evening. Unremarkable. As he sipped his wine and savored the rich Italian food, something unfurled in Walter's chest. Peace. Contentment. The joy of freely expressing himself at long last. Tears stung his eyes and he blinked them away. Because Walter refused to hide anymore. He couldn't waste any more years suffocating his true nature. For the first time, he envisioned a future of self-acceptance and serenity, where he could be all of himself, masculine and feminine, strong and soft. Gazing at his reflection in the restaurant window as he waited for the check, the green silk hugging his curves, the auburn curls tumbling past his shoulders, the newfound light in his eyes, Walter smiled. A rush of peace and exhilaration enveloped him. Squaring his shoulders, Walter paid the bill, gathered his purse, and stepped out the door. His heels clicked on the sidewalk as he strode to his car. As Walter drove home from the restaurant, adrenaline still buzzing through his veins from his first public outing as a woman, a daring idea took root. He imagined Janet finding the clues, a silk scarf draped over the sofa, a tube of lipstick left on the bathroom counter, a strand of auburn hair clinging to his pillow. The thrill of discovery, the inevitable confrontation, the soul-bearing confession. It simultaneously terrified and electrified him. In the privacy of the attic later that night, Walter meticulously selected items from his secret stash. A lacy black bra, a pair of shimmery stockings, a floral perfume bottle. His heart stuttered as he pictured Janet's confused expression, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of these foreign objects infiltrating their home. The next morning, Walter arranged the stockings on the bed, in plain view. His hands trembled as he smoothed out the delicate nylon. Part of him hoped Janet would barge in and catch him in the act, but the house remained silent. She'd already left for her morning yoga class. Over the next few days, Walter grew bolder. He draped a silky nightgown over the arm of the sofa, left a smudge of ruby red lipstick on a mug in the sink, spritzed the floral perfume on his side of the closet. Each time his pulse spiked, stomach somersaulting with a dizzying combination of anticipation and dread. At first, Janet didn't seem to notice the additions to their home decor. She breezed through the house, preoccupied with her daily routines and social engagements. Walter's disappointment mingled with relief. Perhaps he'd been too subtle. But then came the unmistakable signs of suspicion. Janet lingering over the lipstick-stained mug, her eyebrows knitting together, sniffing the perfume-scented air in their bedroom, her nose wrinkling, holding up the lacy bra with the tips of her fingers like it might burn her. "Walter, honey," she called out, a tremor beneath the forced casualness in her tone. "Whose bra is this? I don't remember buying it." Walter froze at the kitchen sink, hands submerged in sudsy dishwater. This was it, the moment of truth. His tongue cleaved to the roof of his mouth, heart slamming against his ribcage. He could brush it off, claim ignorance, but the words refused to come. He was so tired of hiding, of lying. Wiping his clammy hands on a dish towel, Walter entered the bedroom. Janet stood beside the bed, the black lace bra dangling from her fingers. Her eyes were wide, her lips pressed into a tight, thin line. "I found this in the laundry hamper," she said, her voice wobbling slightly, "along with a pair of stockings and a nightgown that definitely aren't mine." Walter's mouth went dry. He tried to swallow, his throat clicking. I can explain." Janet's eyes filled with tears. She dropped the bra onto the bedspread like it had scalded her. Are you having an affair?" "No!" The denial burst out of Walter, vehement and immediate. "No, Janet, I would never. I love you." She shook her head, swiping at her damp cheeks. "Then whose are these? The perfume in our closet, the makeup in the bathroom? I don't understand." Walter's heart cracked at the distress and confusion etched into the lines of Janet's face. He longed to gather her into his arms, to soothe away the hurt, but he stood rooted to the carpet, paralyzed. "They're mine," he whispered, the words scraping his throat raw. "The clothes, the makeup, they belong to me." Janet stared at him, her brow creasing. What do you mean, they're yours?" Walter's heart hammered against his sternum. His skin prickled with cold sweat. I like to wear women's clothing sometimes. I always have." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and charged. Janet's mouth fell open, her eyes round with shock. You wear women's clothing?" He nodded, his throat too tight for words. Tears blurred his vision. Janet sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands twisting in her lap. "I don't understand. Are you transgender? Do you want to become a woman?"
No.
Walter said quickly. He crossed the room and sat beside her, careful to leave space between them.
I'm a man. I'm your husband. That hasn't changed. I have a feminine side. A part of me that feels more myself in dresses and heels and lipstick.
Janet shook her head slowly, her gaze distant and bewildered.
How long have you— My whole life,
Walter admitted, his voice cracking. Since I was a boy. But I was always too ashamed to tell anyone. I thought you would leave me if you knew. A tear slipped down Janet's cheek. She reached out tentatively, her hand hovering over Walter's knee. "I would never leave you for being yourself." Relief crashed over Walter, so intense it stole his breath. He blinked back the hot sting of tears. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was just so scared." Janet's hand settled on his knee, warm and solid. "I love you, Walter. All of you. Even the parts I don't fully understand yet." He covered her hand with his own, their fingers intertwining.
I love you too, Janet. More than anything.
They sat in silence for a long moment, the air around them thick with unspoken questions and emotions. Finally, Janet turned to him, her eyes searching his face. Can I see you? In the clothes, the makeup?" Walter's heart stuttered. He swallowed hard.
You want to see me dressed as a woman?
She nodded, a tentative smile curving her lips.
I want to know all of you, every last bit.
With shaking hands, Walter led Janet up to the attic. He unlocked the suitcase, revealing his treasured feminine possessions. Janet gasped softly as she took in the colorful array of dresses, skirts, blouses, and wigs. Can I dress you?" she asked, her voice hushed with wonder. Throat too tight for words, Walter could only nod. He stood still as Janet reverently selected a flowing purple dress, a auburn wig, and a pair of silver kitten heels. She helped him out of his masculine attire and into the feminine outfit, her touch gentle and affirming. When she finished, Janet stepped back, her eyes shining with emotion. "Oh, Walter, you look beautiful." Walter's heart swelled, tears blurring his vision. He gazed at his reflection in the attic mirror, the dress swirling around his knees, the auburn curls tumbling over his shoulders, the joy and peace radiating from his face. For the first time, he felt truly seen, truly loved. Every carefully locked away part of himself now met with acceptance and wonder. Janet stood behind him, her arms encircling his waist, her chin resting on his shoulder. Their eyes met in the mirror, an unbreakable connection. Walter thought about Robert Herrick's poem, "To the virgins, to make much of time," the words taking on new meaning. "Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, old time is still a-flying, and this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying." All those years hiding his authentic self, suffocating beneath the weight of fear and shame. No more. He refused to waste another precious second. "Thank you," Walter whispered, turning in Janet's arms, "for seeing me, for loving me." He'd never dreamed that at 60 years old he would finally, fully become himself in all his beautiful complexity, masculine and feminine, strong and soft, courageous and vulnerable. And so began the extraordinary second act of Walter's life story. A tale of a man who dared to embrace his feminine heart, who discovered that like an unopened flower, it was never too late to blossom into his true self. With Janet by his side, he knew anything was possible. They took things slowly at first, navigating this uncharted territory together. Some evenings, Walter would shyly ask Janet to help him pick out an outfit or apply his makeup. She'd stand with him at the bathroom mirror, carefully sweeping eyeshadow over his lids or fussing with the drape of a skirt. These quiet moments of intimacy brought them closer, giggling like teenagers as Janet smudged lipstick or Walter wobbled in heels. Slowly but surely, they found their rhythm, settling into this new facet of their relationship. As Walter grew more comfortable, he started venturing out of the house in feminine attire. Short walks around the block gradually expanded into trips to the grocery store or the library. Janet watched her husband bloom with each successful outing, his confidence and ease in his own skin growing. One Saturday morning over coffee and toast, Walter set down the newspaper and fixed Janet with a hesitant smile. "There's a charity garden tour in Rosemont next weekend. I was thinking maybe we could go together? As girlfriends?" Janet paused with her mug halfway to her lips, eyebrows rising. In all their years of marriage, Walter had never once expressed interest in gardens or tours thereof. But the hopeful gleam in his eye, the slight tremble of anticipation in his voice, told her this was no ordinary excursion. Slowly, she lowered her mug and returned his smile. "That sounds lovely, like a girl's day out." Walter's face split into a grin, eyes crinkling at the corners. "Really? Oh, Janet, thank you. This means so much to me." The following Saturday dawned warm and cloudless, perfect weather for strolling through lushly landscaped gardens. They took their time getting ready together, the bathroom crowded with makeup and styling tools, the bedroom strewn with discarded outfit options. Janet zipped Walter into a breezy floral sundress, smoothing her hands over his shoulders. He shimmied slightly, delighting in the swish of the skirt around his freshly shaved legs. "You're going to need a name, you know," Janet said, meeting his eyes in the mirror with a playful smile. "For when I introduce you to the other garden club ladies." Walter pursed his rouged lips, considering. "I've always liked the name Wendy." "Wendy," Janet repeated, something warm and fond unfurling in her chest. It suits you. They finished their preparations in a giddy rush, Janet fastening a string of pearls around Wendy's neck, Wendy helping Janet buckle her sandals. By the time they piled into the car, they were running late, but neither could find it in themselves to care. The garden tour was held at a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Rosemont, all manicured hedges and bursting flower beds. Janet had to suppress a smile as Wendy teetered slightly on the cobblestone path in her heels, gripping Janet's arm for balance. They collected their programs and badges from the registration table, the volunteer smiling at them benignly. First time attending the tour, ladies? Yes, Janet said, slipping her arm through Wendy's. My girlfriend Wendy and I thought it would make for a nice day trip. She felt Wendy stiffen slightly beside her, a hitch in her breath at the casual term of endearment. But then she relaxed, leaning into Janet's side with a soft, pleased smile. As they strolled arm in arm through the fragrant gardens, Janet couldn't help but marvel at the woman beside her. Wendy moved hesitantly but determinedly in her heels, the breeze ruffling her auburn curls. She paused often to admire a particularly striking blossom or sculptural arrangement of succulents, slender fingers brushing reverently over silky petals. Other tour attendees, mostly older women in bright sundresses and floppy hats, smiled and nodded at them as they passed. If any of them suspected Wendys Secret, they gave no indication, just pleasant small talk about the unseasonably warm weather and the impressive topiary display. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.